All right. Hello and welcome. I'm Elissa Nadworny. I'm a reporter at NPR. I cover higher ed, and I am joined by 5 students today who are going to share their experience and their thoughts on kind of this crazy historical moment that higher education is living through right now. We were talking earlier that, the news is happening every minute, every second. Colleges are announcing changes, things are moving for students, they're trying to figure out their lives and how to do classes at the same time. So today we have a really unique and wonderful opportunity to hear from them. Before we get started, I just wanted to say that this webinar is hosted by Today's Student Coalition. That's a group of 22 policy, advocacy, and membership organizations who are pushing for policy changes to better serve today's students. You can learn more about that coalition at today'sstudentcoalition.org. That's today'sstudentscoalition.org. So as we jump in, I would love for all of the panelists to just go through and introduce yourself. We'll do kind of about a minute or so. Tell us who you are, a little bit about you, and where you go to school. So who wants to start?
I'll start.
Yeah, okay.
My name's Camille Cooper. I'm from Starkville, Mississippi, and I attended school at East Mississippi Community College. I did a technical program there where I did electromechanical technology and got an associate's degree in applied science. I did graduate this past May. Of course, we didn't get to walk or do graduation, but we did it on the internet, So anyway, I am 28 years old. I decided to go back to school at a later age and get a degree because I am a single mother. And so I chose a technical program. So it was hugely beneficial to me because I was able to come right out of school and have a job. So I currently am employed as a full-time employee at Columbus Light and Water, which is a town close to where I live. And I work in the electrical department over there.
Great. Thank you for being here. Marc, why don't you go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Marc Younker. I am from West Orange, New Jersey. I go to Rutgers University, New Brunswick. I'm a rising junior, where I study political science and labor studies, and I minor in critical intelligence. I'm happy to be here. I'm also the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Association of Big Ten Students. For those of you that don't know, the Association of Big Ten Students is an organization that serves to advocate for the 500,000 plus students that are part of the Big Ten Conference. So that's schools like Rutgers University, University of Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, University of Nebraska, and so on. So yeah, that's me.
Great. All right, Patrick, why don't you go?
Hi, everyone. I'm Patrick Miller. I'm 29. I'm an 8-year active duty Air Force veteran and a current reservist. I just graduated in May with my bachelor's in political science from the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and I'm currently a graduate student for their master's in public administration program. I'm a transfer student. I transferred from an online school when I was active duty, and I'm using my GI Bill to get my degrees.
Awesome. All right, Kat, you're up.
Hi, everyone. Super glad to be here. My name is Kat, and I'm a rising senior at Cornell. I'm originally from Bel Air, Maryland, and I transferred into Cornell from UVA in 2018. I'm majoring in industrial labor relations, minoring in English, hoping to focus on education policy in the future. And at Cornell, I'm the vice president of our student government.
All right, last but not least, you ready?
Everyone, my name is Yoslin. I am a senior at University of Maryland. I am 22 years old. I have 2 boys, ages 5 and 3, and I'm majoring in government and politics and a minor in public policy. I'm also a parent advisor to Ascend at the Aspen Institute. I am a scholar with Generation Hope, with who I do a lot of advocacy, so a lot of student advocacy, student parent advocacy on higher ed. And with the Ascend as a parent advisor, we actually just launched a innovative fund, the Parent Power Solution Fund, the first of its kind in the country. And it's a fund that was built by student parents for student parents.
That's awesome. Well, why don't we stick on the student parent idea for a second. We have two student parents here. I wonder if you could share what kind of your experience was in the spring. Give us a sense of what it was like having children and finishing your classes in the spring.
Well, it was, for me, it was very chaotic, and it was kind of everything was done very last minute. And so UMD, was not making decisions, I think, quick enough. And I think with things like that, like the transparency and just like the quick turnaround, would have been really helpful, because I had to transition. At that time, I was also an intern, so I was doing an internship 3 days a week, and I had to turn that into remote learning because I was remote working, because I was getting credit. So if I didn't continue my internship, I wasn't going to receive the credits in school. And I had the 5 classes on top of that, and now I had to transition into being a speech therapist for my son and a pre-K teacher. Nothing which is my expertise. So it was very, very difficult trying to do all of that at the same time.
So coming from that experience, then what are you thinking about for fall, and kind of what does that mean going forward?
So, for example, right now, I think one of the biggest issues that I'm having is that the classes that I'm hoping to take. So I was hoping that what happened in the spring was going to happen in the fall. So my classes became asynchronous, which means that I was able to do the work and I was able to do everything on my own time. But with the classes that I hope to take in the fall, they're synchronous, which means that I actually have to be sitting and I actually have to do Zoom meetings and I have to do Zoom classes. And I have other responsibilities because I am also a part-time legislative aide at the Maryland General Assembly. I have a part-time job. I'm a custodian. I'm an essential worker. And if my son is learning online and if I'm learning online, my schedule currently looks like Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm going to be sitting at a laptop from 9 to 4:45 p.m. with 10-minute breaks in between classes. And if I don't have the luxury to kind of take my children to childcare and take them out somewhere while I do my classes, so I have to choose between whether I have to take an asynchronous class, because they do offer them, that doesn't interest me, or take a synchronous class that does interest me, but then have to figure out, okay, like, what am I going to do with my children?
Yeah, that's a tough choice. And it seems like, especially in this moment, like flexibility is just like the name of the game. Like you just need flexibility to you're already bouncing so much.
Yeah.
I wonder, and Camille, you can weigh in here too, like, are there things that schools or maybe even Congress or policymakers can do to help support student parents? Like, were there things that would have helped you, maybe if your Pell Grant was increased or more money for childcare? Can you name kind of things that may have made it easier for you as a student parent?
Definitely. I did go to school on a full Pell Grant. That's how I was able to go back to school. So I was graduated with 0 student debt. And so, if I have a mother that's retired, so it was a huge blessing to me that she was able to help. However, she was in daycare. They had to help pay for that because it is expensive, and they were willing to do that while I was in school. But not everyone has that luxury. So I think definitely like increasing the Pell Grant or providing some kind of daycare certificate or something where you could send your kids to, a daycare while you went back to school would help encourage other single mothers or just mothers in general, give them that opportunity to go back to school. Because I know if I didn't have my family support, that I wouldn't have been able to be where I am today. So I think that would definitely help. By increasing the Pell Grant or doing some kind of aid for that, because it is so hard to go to school and be a parent, especially with young children that aren't in kindergarten or in necessarily elementary education or anything.
Yeah. Well, especially given the pandemic and kind of, as we were just talking about, kind of being a preschool teacher and, you know, a therapist, and you're doing all these extra things on top of being your own student, your student yourself. I want to stay in this idea of kind of what the spring was like, because I think, you know, a lot of people on the outside as policymakers and folks who work at organizations maybe don't quite understand what it was like. You know, this massive shift from going in person to online and kind of being quarantined at home or stuck at home. I wonder, Marc, why don't you start us off? Will you tell us a little bit about what that was like for you?
Yeah, so it was definitely a giant turnaround from coming home and continuing classes or almost business as usual from, you know, my desk at home rather than a school library or my classroom. So I think the greatest shift that happened for me was figuring out how to learn online. You know, I'm someone who needs or prefers to have that in-person connection in order to do my best form of learning, to be able to ask the best questions that I have on hand and to interact or do like team working exercises. So it was definitely a different space to be, you know, seeing my professors, not just on my laptop, but also having to do group projects online or working with a student that I might have never talked to because of a large school. So in a lecture hall that I've never seen before, but now have to work a group project through virtually. Another issue I think would say is also balancing what's like being at home and still being a student. There are still things that need to go on while you're at home. The garbage needs to be taken out. Your bed still needs to be made. You still have to cook or eat for yourself, or maybe mom's cooking for you. I don't know. But there isn't a dining hall, or there isn't a library as much to escape to, just for the sake of social distancing and, you know, staying within your own privacy. So that was definitely one of the hardest challenges that I face as a student who's now, you know, I guess a student from home, not necessarily working from home, but and then I would say the other part of it was also managing like the social aspect of it as well. I think as students, a large part that keeps our mental health intact is having such close access to our friends, having such close access to other people that we like to interact with and spend our time with, and having that also taken away for the safety of the public, but still has done some, you know, has taught us to use things like Zoom parties and FaceTime to see our friends. So that's been a little bit difficult as well.
Where was your setup? Where did you end up doing most of your classes or your work in your house?
Actually from my dining room table. Offered me the most space to lay stuff out. Obviously my mom's not happy with that, that her dining room has become now a classroom. So hopefully after this fall semester we can go back, she can send me back to school.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of dining room tables and kitchens. Definitely hard when your family is all around and maybe not doing classes at the same time as you. Kat, did you transfer, or did you shift to online too? And how was that?
We also did move to online. It was at first like hugely chaotic, just the process of getting off campus for a lot of students. I'm an RA on campus. There are these questions on whether RAs would keep getting paid. And then when we obviously moved to online, we're not going to be in those dorms anymore. Should we get paid? I think yes, but that's another question. So the online learning aspect was definitely complicated. My sister was taking classes from her community college at the same time. So finding space in the house where we could both hold classes at the same time, not get in each other's ways, we share a room, was kind of difficult. So ultimately just like Marc said, finding space for yourself in your house that's not being interrupted by parents, learning how to navigate the social scene, maintain friendships is so important, maintain your mental health. That was all really important to me.
Yeah, and definitely the social part is a big question as schools kind of think about what the fall looks like with their reopening plans. Many schools that have kind of a residential aspect are torn between kind of trusting students to socially distance, and also, you know, there is something that gets lost when you can't kind of have those connections and even just a break from your classes, you know, as Marc was saying, just kind of the mental space to just not look at the computer all day. Patrick, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your experience as a student veteran and kind of the role that has played through your schooling. I know it's a really broad question, I know.
No, that's a good question. It was a difficult transition because I'm the vice president, outgoing vice president of the Student Veterans Organization on campus. And most of what we do, so student veterans nationally are represented by Student Veterans of America, who's our mainline education advocate for veterans in higher ed. But when it comes to boots on the ground, student veteran organizations are really a community support and network building environment. So we would host, my chapter specifically hosts a coffee talks on Wednesday where we bring in a local non-denominational pastor, and he kind of leads a group in just discussion and talking about things. And if you need sort of a spiritual religious guide, he's there to talk to you, or he can meet you later. And then on Fridays, we have a counselor from our campus psychological services come in and hold a group session where we have pizza, and then you talk about your high lows for the week. And then if you need to see a therapist, the campus offers free therapy, and you can schedule it with her there, because it removes that stigma from, actually walking across campus and walking into psychological services, which can be a huge barrier for not just veterans, but all students. So it's been tough to kind of lose that communication with our veterans on campus, but so far everyone seems to be doing okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up though, because I think, one thing we're often focused on classes when we think about what happens when the campus closes down. But it's, the support services that I think are also so crucial to the experience at college. So what did that look like to transition virtually? I mean, did you guys try and do that over?
We did. We did transfer to hosting them at the same time, the same day. But some people, I think, kind of just came for the pizza sometimes, which is fine. But when you come for the pizza, you still participate, of course. The numbers have taken a hit, but I think that's just a lot of veterans are like Camille and Yoslin. They're students that also have their own families. They have kids. And so they can't just take an hour out of their day to lock themselves in a room and just talk about what's going on in their lives. They have to focus on their families. They have to focus on their class, their households. So the numbers have decreased, but we're hoping when fall kicks back up that there might be a little bit more time for students to come back in.
What do you know about fall? And I kind of throw this out to the group. I mean, of course, Camille, you've graduated, you're working, but I'm wondering, how communicative have your schools been throughout this process, and what do you wish was maybe different, or what's working, what's not working? And that can apply to kind of everyone. Let's all kind of think about it and jump in. But Patrick, I wonder, because you've graduated, but now you're going on for more schooling.
Yeah, so here in Omaha, the semester looks to be just basically completely remote, but we're offering both asynchronous courses and synchronous courses. So I'm taking one synchronous course on Mondays. It's like a 3-hour course. And then my other 2 courses for the semester are just remote online learning. But beyond that, I'm not sure right now.
Have they been communicative though? Have colleges been doing a good job in keeping you guys informed? Kat, you're shaking your head. Oh, yeah, jump in.
Okay. Well, for us, I think they have sent us communication emails, and they have sent us many emails, with updates. But the updates have been they were very vague. And so it was kind of like from the beginning of the pandemic. And it's something that I completely understand in the beginning, because, we were all trying to kind of just shift. We were all trying to understand. And UMD was one of the schools that, we went for spring break, and then they were like, no, we're going to close down, and we're going to do remote learning. We'll give you the week off after spring break to give teachers that week to prepare for remote learning, and we'll be back. I think it was like April 15th. And then like 2 days before April 15th came, they sent us an email and we're like, no, we're not going to come back to campus. We're expecting to come back April 30th. And it kind of just, they kind of dragged their feet with just saying, no, we'll stick to remote learning for the rest of the semester. And then afterwards, the communication was there, but it was very vague. It was just until recently, probably a week ago, that they sent out an email that said that 80% of undergraduate courses would be online and 20% would be held in person. And it was the courses that really needed to be in person, like research, laboratories, science, anything that had to be really hands-on. And that the classes would just be synchronous and asynchronous. And that they would have a schedule up and to look at it. And that was essentially it. If we needed more information, so for example, like I'm a commuter, so I don't need information on the dining halls or the residence halls. But if people wanted that information, they kind of just had to go searching for it and looking for it to see what was going on. And even though that's not something that affects me, I felt like it shouldn't have been something that people have. It's not something that people need to go and look for themselves. It's kind of like you're sending lengthy emails, just put it all in there.
Yeah, Kat, you're shaking your head. What are you thinking?
Yeah, Cornell has done a relatively good job of staying in communication with their students. But on Yoslin's note about like courses and emails and all that, Cornell still hasn't really gone through our course enrollment stage for even the fall, and the fall is approaching pretty quickly. So this leaves a lot of students in a state of uncertainty, especially for our first year and our transfer students. They don't know what credits will be like taken for the fall. They don't know what classes they're even going to be able to take. So I think this is like especially leaving students in like this heightened state of uncertainty because Cornell has pushed back our enrollment.
Yeah, Marc.
Yeah, I don't want to echo too much of what both Yoslin and Kat said, but I think another challenge has also been, at least on the Rutgers communication on that will be remote for the rest of the fall semester, how we're figuring out what classes will be scheduled for when and at what times remotely, whether it be asynchronous or synchronous, has really thrown students for a loop because they also have to schedule things now like remote internships, remote working around that they're planning for the fall semester as well. And leaving that up to like a month's time of planning might not be enough time for certain students. The other issue with that is that for students who live off campus or who rent houses, are now dealing with like trying to get out of their leases to move back home if they live far away, and there's no point in paying monthly rent to not live in a space. How they're going to finance or budget that due to such short notice with figuring out whether or not we were going to be on campus for the fall. Having universities help out in whatever way they can to help students or assist them financially in these situations, I think is what's really needed as well. Because as we know, during COVID-19 took away quite a few jobs, or transitioned quite a few jobs into something new. So we need to afford students the time and space to take on these new environments, but also, help our pockets out as well.
Yeah, let's stick with that theme of finances, but I just want to kind of echo what you said about the housing, because I think you're absolutely right. A lot of students have already perhaps signed leases. Many has signed them in the spring for the academic year. And so that's a real challenge I've been hearing from students is kind of where do they live? How do they deal with housing? And then of course the internet and kind of the connectivity implications, which we can get to. But I want to stick here with finances for a little bit, because I'm curious for any of you who are still enrolled, and we'll get you in the conversation, Camille, too, because you have a lot, but I'm sure you're like, I'm so glad this is over. But I wanted, do any of you, have you had your financial aid packages changed? And has there been any communication of kind of extra funds either from the university or through the CARES Act, which was Congress's effort to get some money down to college students? I wonder if the roundtable seems to be working, if you guys are okay with that, kind of jumping in when you have thoughts. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the finances. So have any of your financial aid packages changed? And then have you had any other sources of money coming in, financial assistance, either through the CARES Act or through other means?
Well, I don't qualify for financial aid because I am a DACA recipient, so I don't get financial aid from, I don't get Pell Grants, and I didn't qualify for the aid that the CARES Act provided for college students because it was only for U.S. citizens and green card holders. So in terms of financial aid package changing for me, since I don't have one, hasn't changed. However, the state of Maryland has two grants. So there's the Educational Assistance Grant and the Guaranteed Access Grant, neither of which I have been eligible for the past 4 years that I've been in school. Taking a little longer as a mom. I started off just part-time, so but I haven't ever, I qualified for it, but I had never been awarded the packages because I was on the higher end of income So it was always more for like the ones that needed it. And so this year, I actually qualified for the educational assistance grant for $3,000. So that was definitely a change that I saw. And I'm not sure if it's, and I'm pretty sure my husband also got it, but my husband gets full coverage through the Pell Grant. So it wasn't something that my husband and I ever had gotten before. So I know maybe I'm thinking that this pandemic had something to do with it.
But yeah, $3,000 is a lot too. That's great. Other folks want to jump in?
Yeah, the CARES Act has actually helped out a bunch of my friends during this time to support them from being home, because many also lost on-campus jobs. So it's given them an opportunity to have something in their pockets to pay for what they would usually pay for with their job that they had either on campus or in the area. I think something that has become an issue or has caused a lot of tension within our college campuses between administration and students has been that either schools haven't decreased their tuition or have actually increased. So at Rutgers, we have our tuition is frozen, so our tuition has stayed the same despite being online for the entire fall semester. The students are wondering what services are going to be replaced if we're going to be receiving equal and adequate services that we would have if we were on campus. At schools like the University of Michigan actually increased their tuition for this upcoming semester, which is a little insane looking at what's happening right now, how a lot of pockets will be financially strained, and yet now we're supposed to pay more for college, but receive our education for the most part online or in a different aspect than what people intended to receive. So I know there have been quite a few petitions and student activism going around on lowering college tuition right now so it can be affordable and that all students can have their access to their education.
Yeah, go ahead, jump in.
Sure. I think this is a really important topic, and I really want to reiterate the fact that students aren't just students. A lot of us are student workers. I'm an RI on campus, and a lot of our first-gen and low-income folks heavily rely on the income they make from school jobs to support themselves and their families. And the CARES Act was really helpful for the students that were able to receive it from Cornell, but there were a lot of students that were still left out and could have really used the financial support. The Office of Student Government Relations, which is like a completely student-led group at Cornell, they've been working nonstop for the past several months to speak with Senate offices, and they've been in direct communication with like our state and our representatives in Washington. And they've been really pushing for a couple of demands, for instance, including eligible dependents above the age of 17 with economic impact payments. So this would be in regards to the stimulus relief, as well as rent relief for students. Again, we've been hearing from a lot of students that they cannot pay rent for and they've signed them to a lease for the next year. And it's just really important that we're recognizing that students, 40% of us lost jobs all across the country, so that we really need like financial support for all of our students.
Patrick, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the finances and how have things changed, or what does that look like for you?
It's interesting. So moving from undergrad to graduate work, as an undergrad, I obviously have my GI Bill, which covers tuition, and it gives me a housing allowance monthly. But it's left a lot of students in a question mark, because when you're a GI Bill recipient, you have to take at least 1 credit hour on campus to qualify for your full benefit. So for example, here in Omaha, it's about $1,400 a month. But if you're not taking a class that would be considered in residence, your housing allowance is shifted from that $1,400 to half the national average, which comes out to about $800. And a lot of students rely solely on that money to survive. Like, I'm one of those students. So it's been difficult, and it's been concerning, especially as a graduate student, now that I don't qualify for Pell Grant. The Pell Grant really made up for any shortcomings I had income-wise during the school year, during breaks, during the summer, and with only being qualified for unsubsidized loans as a graduate student. I don't really want student debt, but it might be an option. And so what I would like to see in a future CARES Act package would be maybe support for graduate students or students that don't qualify for Pell Grants, to help them kind of transition, to bridge the gaps between, say, the end of one semester to the beginning of another one, for the summer months, to help them not have to worry about taking out loans or cruising themselves into debt.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, we've just heard of 2 big groups that were kind of excluded from CARES Act money, the dependents and and DACA and undocumented. So yeah, do any of you else have thoughts on, you know, your dream package from Congress if they were to help college students?
I think the PEBT funds,
Tell us
that
what
were,
that is for folks who don't know what that is.
so the pandemic EBT fund, so it was basically kind of like food stamps, but it was essentially just, it covered for the children that were receiving free or reduced lunch in schools, and it would provide them with, I guess, lunch money, from the time that schools have been closed to the end of the school year. And so some families received their cards in the mail, and I think that it should be extended beyond K through 12. I think it should have been extended to college students, and I think that should be something, because even though I understand it was for kids, college students are struggling. College students are living, not every college student, but a lot of college students are barely making it by. And so I think including them in those funds, so they could at least have something to purchase groceries with, to kind of fend themselves with. I think that would also be really helpful.
Bill, I want to kind of get you in this conversation too. And one of the things that, you know, a lot of schools have juggled through the summer and now into the fall is for technical programs, for hands-on classes, it's especially difficult to do an online world.
Definitely.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, first of all, the value of your degree. I want to talk a little bit more about that connection to the job. You know, we're seeing a economy in which there are millions of Americans without jobs right now. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that, your reason for doing that specific degree program and the connection to the job. But then also, how do you envision this working for all of these programs like yours that are so hands-on, that's so important to be in person?
Okay, so the reason that I chose the technical program is, honestly, I wanted to go back to school. I didn't have 4 years to devote to go back to school, being a single mother. So I looked into the technical programs here at a community college near me, and we have a lot of industries around here, from plants that make tires to truck engines, different things like that, and they're always in need of people. So I knew that if I went through one of those programs, it wouldn't be difficult to find a job. I really went in with no background in electrical or mechanical. When I signed up, I had no idea that I'd be the only girl in every class for 2 years, but that was okay. Um, it was a great experience. The teachers there went above and beyond. There were times that I was like, I don't know if I can do this, and they would stay after their hours to even give me that one-on-one help. All of our classes are fairly small, so you get a lot of individual attention with instructors who all have numerous years of experience out in industry and things like that. So the reason I chose it, ENCC helped me get an internship, a paid internship, my third semester in school. They partnered with a bunch of different industries in the area. So we all went to interviews, and I got one. I worked there. We were given an allotted number of hours. ENCC paid some of the salary, and the industry I worked for paid the other part. So when I ran out of hours there, the more I worked there, I loved it. I enjoyed it. I had a great experience, learned a lot. But I kind of realized that, you know, when you go into industry, they're going to put you on nights or weekends when you start out. And I just was like, I don't know if I could do that being a single mother. So I, prayed about it, and I was like, well, I met another connection at ENCC. A man had come out and spoke with our class. He was a HR representative for smaller corporations and businesses in the area. So I reached out to him, and he said, yeah, come meet with me. We talked, and as soon as I finished my internship with Packard Industry, it's in Columbus, Mississippi. They make diesel truck engines for Peterbilt and Kentworth. As soon as I finished there, it wasn't a week or two later, I had an interview with Columbus Light and Water, which provides the electrical and light for a town called Columbus, Mississippi. So I went in and had an interview, and they were willing to take me on as a part-time basis due to the fact that I was still in school. So it was a huge blessing. I got paid. I was able to learn the whole time, go to school on the other days, and then when I finished school, and it was kind of weary because it was the pandemic was going on during this time, and so I didn't know if it was going to be in the budget or what was going to happen as far as getting hired on full time. So it was a huge blessing that they called me in and offered me a full time position. I do get, that was my goal by graduating. I needed benefits for my daughter, health insurance. I needed something with retirement and things like that. And so I graduated with zero student debt. I have a full-time job making salary. A lot of people, I feel like this day and age, kind of look down on doing hands-on work, like being an electrician or a plumber or something like that. But there's such a high demand for that right now. And I still have industries calling me today, wanting to know if I need an interview or things like that. So there's such a high demand for it. And with me being a female, it kind of stands out because very few females I don't know if it's just because it is intimidating being a female, and I am the only female that works in the technical part of it, which is fine by me. They don't treat me any differently. I actually had a lady stop the other day, was changing out an electric meter, and she's like, we've never seen a woman, before. And so, but it's just different, that the times are changing, and so I think that, one of my goals was always just, to lead by example, to let other females know that, hey, you can go back to school and do this. You can make a good living for your family. I came out of school making more than some of my friends that went to four-year schools, and I'm not knocking that by any means, but I love it. It's, I was diagnosed with ADHD at a young age, so I never enjoyed sitting down and listening to lectures all day. It's not for me. The hands-on, I loved it. I loved going to school. It was challenging, and I loved every aspect of it. And today, I enjoy my work. I get to work outside a lot, and it is very hot and humid right now. And I do wear long sleeve fire retardant clothes, so it makes it a little bit more hot, but I love it. I love being outdoors. It's really a fun and cool job. I get exposed to so many different things. And so I just think that as far as going back to school, the classes are small for our technical schools. We recently, EMCC recently built a brand new state-of-the-art facility with all hands-on equipment. And so I do know that they are planning to return. And I don't know as far as the class sizes. I know they are following all CDC guidelines as far as the mask and all that. So I hope that everything's able to work out for them, because it is so important to get that hands-on, because you can watch the teacher or watch anybody do something and it might look so easy, and then you get to do it and it's so it's so important, that hands-on aspect of it. So I know that thankfully when the pandemic came on, I was done with my hands-on part. I was in a physics course. I did have a lab, and it was hard transitioning online just because my daughter's school was closed. So I had her, and a lot of the tests and things were timed. So once I started, I couldn't stop and make her dinner, or, so it was a little difficult. I usually waited till about 11 right before it was due to do it. But I hope, and I think that they'll be able to keep the class sizes down enough to get these hands-on classes back going. And because we do have a lot of, we have a lot of industries out here that need skilled technicians. And I do believe EMCC is doing a wonderful job by creating that new center and, being able to fill these jobs out here in our area.
I wonder, have you guys thought about, or has the pandemic and the economy kind of changed your perception of what you're doing here enrolling in school? Not so much as like questioning your decision, but I wonder if your focus for the outcome has changed, if your thoughts about your career or your major or kind of what you want to do has changed at all, given kind of the state of the economy and the pandemic. And the answer can be no. That's okay too.
I'll jump in real quick and say something. But as far as the industry and things go, a lot of the industries here shut down when the pandemic happened. They weren't able to get a lot of the parts in, or they had to shut down due to the number of employees they have and everything like that. Or if one employee gets it, they had to. So a lot of the industries, the industry that I interned at actually shut down for weeks on end. And a lot of the people I knew there had so much trouble filing for unemployment, and they didn't get paid. And it made me so grateful for where I worked at Columbus Light and Water, because it is essential. Everyone needs electricity at their home and water. So we never shut down. We did go to skeleton crews where we worked half capacity, and we would one person would work 1 week and flip flop. So it kind of made me grateful that not necessarily that I got out of industry, but that I'm working somewhere that will never shut down, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder, like, has kind of what we're living through. Yeah, Marc, jump in.
Personally, it hasn't changed my goals yet. But I do know the economy is changing for whatever that looks like. Some people say like an impending recession and whatnot. So that means the job market is going to be changing as well. I know some of my friends are actually looking to take a gap semester or maybe a gap year to get more like hands-on work during this time, rather than paying like a full tuition for online school if they don't think that they can do as well if something like grad school is their next step. So to open their doors a little bit more and open those channels for opportunity, to use this time for another internship experience or a semester or work experience, or to move and do something else. I do know though, however, a lot of students who are in the medical field definitely have a lot of jobs their way who are either working with nurses, doctors, medical technicians, and that kind of stuff. So good for them. But it hasn't changed my career trajectory, hopefully. And hopefully you can really recover from the COVID-19's impact on the job market. For students who are graduating with 4-year degrees, probably with student debt, and can hopefully get a good salary paying job right out of college.
Yeah. Patrick, was your plan always to keep going for more schooling? Was that influenced by the pandemic at all?
My plan wasn't to come back for a master's so soon. So since I'm interning, I'm a policy intern at Student Veterans of America for the summer, but the original plan was to intern in Congress for the summer at a senator's office, hopefully, and then snag a full-time staffer job after that. But coronavirus kind of shifted everything. I had a trajectory beforehand, Congress, continue working on Capitol Hill, but now it's back to school for a master's and then try again in a year or so.
So was that decision was like, okay, the job market is pretty terrible right now?
Well, it wasn't exactly that. So my internship, although I work with SVA, is actually through the Washington Center in DC, where for your summer internship, so the program I'm in is called the Veteran Employment Trajectory Initiative. And so they house you in DC for the summer, and you work full-time for, it can be Congress, it can be a nonprofit, it could even be like an aerospace company in DC. And then, you spend 4 days a week working there, and then you spend 1 day a week learning how to build your resume, how to sell yourself to companies and industries, and then, like I said, networking, professional development. And then at the end of it, hopefully, you either find a job at the company you're working for or another job to come rolling right out. And so my goal was internship in DC for the summer, network, get a job, and then like a year or so from now, come back and go to grad school. But here we are.
Kat, what about you? And what are you thinking? How has it changed kind of your perception of what you're doing?
Yeah. At first, it was really difficult trying to balance the fact that I didn't really want to graduate into a recession, the post-COVID-19 recession. And in general, higher ed enrollment does go up in recession, just because lack of job opportunities. But at the same time, and then I was also trying to balance that against the fact that I was thinking of taking a leave of absence for this, for the coming semester, maybe even a gap year, because again, it's like, what do I want to do right now? Balancing that against future job opportunities, future grad school plans. So it was very difficult, and it was especially exacerbated by the fact that students, colleges did take a while to kind of come up with their plans for the fall. And ever since the news came out, I think I've been able to finalize my plans. Like I will be returning to my job on campus. I'm going to be RAing again, because that is really important to a lot of students. A lot of people don't have the privilege of getting to take a semester or a year off because they do rely on those on-campus jobs.
And are you pretty confident that what is today, July 20th, that plan is going to stay in place?
I think so. I'm going to stick with a yes.
Yeah, a yes and a fingers crossed, perhaps.
Exactly.
I'm curious, Marc brought up this idea of the cost of higher ed and kind of as schools maybe transition to online or they change some of their offerings, um, should there be a price difference? And I'm curious just your thoughts on this. It doesn't have to be the right answer or anything. I'm just curious, how do you think about that? Like, is what you transition to in the spring and what you're potentially facing in the fall, is that the same thing that you would have paid for a year ago?
So I think for me, one of the things is like, for example, I know University of Maryland, I think they charge a transportation fee because they do have buses around the area that we can use because it's such a big campus that we can just kind of use our ID on, get on for free, and just kind of get from point A to point B. So just kind of for reference, let's say I this past semester I parked in what's known as the Xfinity Center, and the building where my classes were being held was actually a 20-minute walk. So instead of doing that 20-minute walk, I could potentially just take a bus, cut it down to like 10 minutes. And so, for example, if for me being an online student, I think the fees should be completely waived because I'm not using those services during the fall. I'm not using any of those services while I'm online. They do have hybrid courses where part of it will be online and part of it will be in person. Should they charge them the full amount for the fees? No, charge them 50% of the fees depending on how long they're going to be there. And just charge the transportation fees or like just the fees to the students that are going to be fully on campus, that have to be on campus. But for those of us that are not going to be on campus, I think those fees should just be waived. I know UMD definitely has frozen their tuition rates and has kept them at the 2019, 2020 rates. But I think the fees and just kind of maybe if they are going to be charging us those fees, then investing them in something that will be really useful, like having tutors on hand that will have like a quick turnaround. So if you need a tutor, it's not going to take 7 to 10 business days for them to get back to you and match you with a tutor. And it would be a really cool way for students that are at home and no longer have those on-campus jobs to make money from home still.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that. People who are listening, be taking notes. Other thoughts on costs and bills, and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's complicated because professors and administrators and people who've put in a lot of time, effort, education, and labor to, impart their wisdom and knowledge onto students definitely deserve to be compensated. And that's where a lot of money from tuitions goes into. However, doing work from home, like my Wi-Fi and our internet isn't free also, right? So what we'd be paying for that massive kind of wide stretching internet you would get at school, you're paying for those services, right? But it's pooled money of all the students together who can afford for that, and allows you to have high speed access internet from whether you're on the Great Lawn or in a library. I think this is where it becomes challenging now because not all students have the same access to proper learning environments that we might all have while we're at school. So whether it looks like families sharing a laptop or printers or whatever projects look like at home are going to be very different than what we could have done at school or on campus. And I think that also a huge part of that is from what your income and what your finances look like. And as at any college, it varies greatly. So I think colleges really have to take into account how they can save students and families as much money as possible. And whether that is lowering tuition or getting more alumni donations or getting more federal support, or Rutgers is a state university, getting more state support to keep our colleges running, to keep our professors paid, to keep staff and everybody who keeps the universities running, keep them paid, right? I don't think it's the right time to be letting basically who are our essential workers before, like our dining staff, our custodial staff, people who might not be as active on our campuses right now, they still have families, people to take care of, and they're part of our college campus community as well. So how do we keep them financially supported and also support our students in return? I think we have to find a balance somewhere. I'm not an economist, so I don't know what.
You're just like, we need money. You guys figure out where we get it from.
And I think the funds are there though for most schools. I don't know what small private college funds look like, but I know for a lot of large universities, the funds are there to keep college students enrolled and to support their staff as well. I think they just have to be pocketed and allocated to the right places, right? I know some schools have been looking at cutting down maybe as much funding that goes into their athletics programs, just because, you won't really have you won't have fans coming out to games or buying, a drink and pretzel or whatever at the arena, just because of social distancing. You can't have people come to games. So maybe if you could switch that money into, supporting student pockets instead, that might be better used for it.
Yeah. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about, so many of you have brought up kind of the student support aspects, that is something maybe that gets kind of lost when you're transitioning to online. Maybe it's something that you thought you were kind of paying for and now you're not getting. We have a question coming in they're curious about how you've been supported academically in this transition, in the spring and then through summer and into fall. Has there been outreach? Are there online tutoring hours? What sort of academic supports have you received from your institutions?
So like I said earlier, like tutoring, I requested a tutor during the summer session and I finished my summer session. I did not hear back. And so it's imperative that those services are available, just because I'm used to doing on-campus courses. I'm not used to doing online courses just because I know I can't hold myself accountable for it. And sometimes with my kids, it can get very, very, I'm spread very thin. I'm spread very thin. And so sometimes, I don't have the time to read through 80 pages of a reading session. And I think also I haven't, I've emailed my academic advisors, and sometimes I understand they're working remotely and they're getting just a ton of emails. But for example, in the government and politics departments, I believe we only have about 3 advisors for the government and politics department. So I think amping up the number of advisors that we have during the fall, I think would be really useful. Have like somewhere else that we can reach out to, have some sort of system, that if you have a question about this, go to this. If you have a question about this, go here. If you have a question about this, go to this person. Because if we're trying to reach out to the same person, especially for me, since I'm a senior and I'm trying to just do things right, because I transferred in from a community college, I lost a credit, and now I'm trying to graduate because I've dragged my feet for so long, and it's something that I just want to get over and done with. I think it's imperative that these services are really, really just accessible, because if I can't access them, or if I'm waiting, if I send an email today and I don't hear a response until next Monday, I think that's going to be really hard on planning. That's going to be really hard on getting the answers that we need and just kind of the supports that we need.
Is there a role here for professors to play? And we'll pass this to another student perhaps, but kind of sticking on the same, like, what supports do you need? How can professors, because they're kind of the ones that perhaps are most in contact with you, help in this moment, this transition?
I think just for like our professors and our educators out there, I think practicing empathy is so important. I'm sure you already do already, but like being really intentional about it is so important, as well as performing individual outreach. If you notice a student has been missing assignments or maybe hasn't been able to come to the lecture, shoot them an email, offer to talk to them in office hours, offer to just like speak to them over email. I had a couple of professors do that to me this past spring, and I thought it was just so invaluable. So just really being intentional about how you're offering support, making sure you're making it directed and you're like paying special attention to those who seem to need it the most.
So Kat, tell us a little bit more about that. So you had specific professors kind of directly email you, and what did you like about that?
Yeah, I think so. I did have a couple professors email me in the spring when we were moving online, just saying like, I know this is a difficult time and I want to extend some support. I also had professors tell us in person before we all moved online that like I will be shifting our course expectations so that because like students who may have different situations at home, like we'll be able to adapt to those and we'll be able to make sure that everyone still is facing like an equitable way of like learning. So I think that is really important. Just like knowing that a professor cares and is there for you is really important to a lot of students.
Yeah, I would actually really like to echo what Kat said. I think it's really important for professors to just be really empathetic and really understand and really understand the diverse group that you may have in your class. And so understand that you have working students, that you have students that are taking care of family members that are not children, parents that are trying to balance all this at the same time. And definitely, you know, I think one of the things that universities could really do is, and it's something I think should be done, they should do training on the resources that the university will offer, because I think a lot of times professors are not aware of the resources that are being offered in our institutions. And if they are aware of all the resources that are available, and if they reach out to you and they say, you know, I've noticed you haven't been to class, or what's going on, and then if you tell them, look, I'm having trouble with this and this, and then you know they're able to direct you, because sometimes as students we're lost and we're not sure where to look or how to get to the resources that may be offered on campus, or by the institution. So I think just the professors being aware and knowing what resources are available so they can give them to students that really need them.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion of just kind of connecting the resources that maybe already exist in the system, but the specific professor doesn't know about them. Marc, go ahead and jump in.
I think another thing that professors should do is place some pressure on their university administrations to give their students more options when it comes to grading. I think because we are in a totally different environment now, our grading scale systems cannot be the same. You can't be looking at how we're taking tests the same way. You can't look at how we're doing essays and assignments and group projects the same way, because it's almost all entirely going to be virtual if your school is going remote for the fall semester. So I think for what I'm advocating for personally is dropping a failure. I don't think students should be allowed, students shouldn't have the opportunity to fail in any professor's class at any school across this country. Because one, there are a lot of factors outside of it that they know that students might not have access to help or the same resources, or really the equal chance to succeed in a class that they might have had before when we were in person. So I think either going with a grading system without a failure and just making it no credit, or pass no credit in a system like that might be the best opportunity for students to maybe still keep their GPA up, still get the grades that they want, to show that they are good students. Because I don't think there's such thing as a bad student. I just don't think they're given the right proper resources. And right now we know that students everywhere aren't really being given the proper resources. So I think schools can do a lot more by changing our grading systems as well. It gives a lot of students more flexibility and opportunity to do their best.
One of the things that has come up a lot during this transition to online is this digital divide. And that can take lots of different shapes and forms, right? It could be maybe you have issues with the hardware, the actual computer. Marc said, you know, some people are sharing a laptop with family members, but it could also just be bad internet. You know, one of the things that we kind of rely on colleges is to access Wi-Fi and to use the library and to have that really strong, amazing internet. I'm curious, it kind of puts a lot of onus on the student who's having the issue to have to raise their hand and say, this isn't working for me, or you know, my internet is bad, or I don't have access to my device. How do we get around that? How can professors and administrators and schools kind of help students, knowing that it's like it might be much to have to raise your hand and kind of admit that something isn't right in your situation. I'm curious just your thoughts on this, what we should do about this. Kat, why don't you jump in first?
Sure. I think one method that I've heard has worked for students is just pre-recording all your lectures instead of forcing students to attend them at the same time. Because if a student is encountering problems with Wi-Fi and they can't make that lecture, then they're going to miss that content. And a lot of the time I've heard that, like, if students are given the flexibility to, this is the time that I can sit down and watch this pre-recorded lecture that my professor recorded for us, then that allows a lot more accessibility for like who can actually attend class in this, when we're moving to online classes.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
I was going to say, so I know here, Montgomery County Public Schools has a partnership. I'm not sure if it's all Maryland, but I know here for the county specifically, they have a partnership with Comcast that students who receive free or reduced lunch are able to get internet Wi-Fi for $10 a month. And so parents are able to get the Wi-Fi that their children need. So maybe some sort of system like that for the universities. Universities could create partnerships with these industries, with these companies, and be able to provide internet connection to the students that may need them, the students in most vulnerable, communities. And I think I saw this, in the chat, it was like the urban or rural areas where it's really hard to get it. I think I understand, just internet access is the biggest barrier sometimes for remote learning. So being able to create a partnership with a company like that and being able to provide a service at a really low rate for college students would be really helpful.
Yeah, Patrick, jump in.
I don't know. So our campus here, after we made the transition after spring break to remote, offered free Wi-Fi hotspots for students who expressed a need for internet access who didn't have it at home. And I know that my veterans office on campus was also offering out the ability to use their laptops to take them, because some of the students don't have their own laptop or computer at home, and they rely on the computer lab that we have in our office to use to get their schoolwork done that they can't do just on paper or in class. And so it's important for the campus to bridge that gap, to fill the holes where they are, instead of trying to blanket cover everybody.
Do you think that the Wi-Fi hotspots and the laptop rental programs are enough, and should they be expanded, or kind of, I think some schools, of course, before this pandemic probably had, just a handful of laptop loaner program or laptop loaners to give out?
That's a good question. So you'd have to talk to the campuses about that. I don't know that information, but I think the people I know that use it here in Omaha felt it was enough, at least. Going forward, that's a good question with the move to strictly online, that there will probably be a bigger need, and especially if people's personal computers getting a lot more use, we might see some breakage, some not able to do the work that they need to be able to do, especially in more hardware intensive roles, people that are going for graphic design or editing or doing stats or physics work might not have good enough equipment to get the work done at home.
I wonder, as we're making changes both on the policy level and administrators at the college level, do you feel like student perspective and student thought has been incorporated enough? And if not, how do we get more students to kind of be involved in those processes?
I think, for me, I don't think student voice has been at the center, or at least at the table. And I think it's really important to have student voice at the table when making decisions, because sometimes, you're making decisions for people and you're not really sure what the situation is like. So you're making choices based on what you think is best, but not really realizing how it affects a group of people. So I think, a lot of universities aren't aware that their student population could be 20% that are 20% student parents. So for example, UMD, I know for a fact, based on national statistics, that 1 in 5 college students is a parent. With UMD having 40,000 students enrolled, that means that at least 8,000 students are student parents. So you're leaving a huge portion of students that aren't, their needs are not being addressed. And so I think that, there's SGA, there's governmental bodies. I think having them at the table and listening to what they have to say, especially because they're also very connected to their peers and their students, and they want to know what they need to do in order to advocate and lobby to the administration. I think having them at the table is really imperative to having student voice and making decisions based on what's needed and not what they believe is needed.
I think the key is that students be engaging with advocacy groups that most closely resemble their needs. So like Student Veterans of America hosts a monthly call with veterans across the country, if you tune in, of course, but to talk about issues that they're facing specifically on the ground in their environment. So you'll hear about something going on in Tennessee, or how campus is helping students in Oregon. So you'll hear SVA has a unique program where they're hearing on the ground grassroots issues that they can turn and use what they're working on already internally to help mold that when they talk to decision makers and policymakers, not just at SVA or in Congress, but they'll talk to other veteran service organizations or the higher learning institutes and make that policy better as they can.
Go ahead, Kat.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think student voices, especially the voices of our most marginalized communities, are definitely not being centered enough. Not even on like the administrative level, but also on the state and the federal level. Students aren't being able to, really get in those rooms. Cornell has been working really hard to like get students to, perform their own lobbying efforts. We have our own student-led group that has been in communication with our state senate. And again, it's not for lack of trying, like that students aren't being heard. Like, we're here, we're making noise, we're here right now, articulating like what we need. I think that people just have to be really, really intentional that they are focusing on those who are being immediately impacted, especially with like schools reopening, especially with, all of the talk about the stimulus package and the new congressional movements.
Yeah, I think Kat touched a lot upon what I was going to say. The other thing about that is that it's not, I think for places where students are invited to the table, it's that our students empowered to have their decisions be followed through on. So sometimes we'll have these roundtable discussions with administration, and it's I hear you, I see you, I feel you kind of thing, but then are you acting on what students are asking for, right? The other critical role that students play is that it's not just that what we want to see done with our schools, that we can act as a bridge between other students who, administration is like this mystical, omniscient being that like they don't really know who they are, what they do, but they make all these decisions for you. There was this one student in one of my classes who his mom was immunocompromised, caught COVID-19, and was hospitalized, right? He didn't know that our dean of students was offering financial services through like the CARES Act and stuff like that, and to help him also from there give them more services when it comes to buying groceries, paying for their like bills at home, getting transportation, stuff like that, so he can get to work. And he's also a student veteran. And he's like, I didn't know all these services existed. And students act as that bridge because, we lived with one another at one point. We went to class with one another, ate together, all this other stuff. If you're going to trust students to act as that bridge, you also have to trust us to make some decisions. You have to trust us to have a powerful voice at the table. I think the next step from here is also asking students to sit on your board of regents, your board of governors, your board of trustees, to have some voting power and truly represent a student bloc at these decision tables. The other side of it, on a more macro level, looking at state legislatures and even Congress, have they reached out to student bodies for the students that they represent? When they're fighting for things like the CARES Act, it's great to look at numbers, but also when you hear people's stories, you know where money needs to be directed to first to immediately solve these issues, right? I have a feeling that we might see more issues of obviously unemployment or issues of food insecurity and housing insecurity, especially housing insecurity with students who can't afford rent or housing insecure from where they came from back home. Can the CARES Act and other federally funded programs help to relieve that burden of things like rent. If you're paying rent for the lease you signed back in, April or May, can you help me pay that off while I also have to pay for where I'm living now, a town hundreds of miles away? Are those stories and perspectives reaching the people in power? I'm not 100% sure, because I don't know if they've all done they have to do their side of it and reach out and say, hey, I have these opportunities. Can you work with me to, solve these problems?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it sounds like such an advantage for both administrators and for legislators to be in touch with students. Like, it doesn't seem like they're doing students a favor. It actually feels like they're opening up this amazing connection with the folks that they're serving. And it, even from what you're saying, Marc, in that it's going both ways. It's helping them communicate what they've already perhaps invested in or decided policy-wise to get to the students, but then also the reverse channel of hearing from students to then impact policy. So it goes both ways. We have a question here about your kind of maybe appetite for innovation in technology. I mean, do you think that this time has kind of brought students a greater acceptance of sort of these like maybe AI or kind of virtual learning experiences? Do you feel like that's opened the door for you and some of your fellow students?
Do you mind rephrasing that question?
Sure, yeah. Well, basically, are you more open to kind of like simulations? I think this is coming from someone who is maybe more in the world of Camille with kind of the hands-on, the labs, the technical stuff. Are you open to kind of experiments in how you learn and the kinds of ways that you learn? Or do you feel like you guys are focused on like, just get me back to the classroom? Like, kind of where are you landing in the modality of higher ed?
I would definitely say, as far as the technical programs go, I know that I've heard people talk about the virtual reality and things like that, things of the future. And I never quite understood that, because with my personal experience, how I gained everything I learned was getting my hands on it. It was using the tools. It was learning how to use wire strippers and everything like that. So I don't really know. I've never experienced a lot with virtual reality, but I know that a lot of the industries and the people that are seeking employees, they require a hands-on test before you can get hired. They have usually a hands-on and a written test. So I feel like, that may put students at a disadvantage. They go apply for a job and they have to do a hands-on test that they've never put their hands on the equipment physically before. What would they do? Because I know that like I said, I'll even at the job I'm at now, I'm learning a lot, but I'll watch the man that's teaching me, and he makes everything look so easy. And then I remember the first time I tried to go do it, it was like, oh my goodness, this is not just putting something in. So getting your hands on it is so important, and having that one-on-one with the teachers was a huge benefit to me, because if I wouldn't have had that support from them and their one-on-one support, I don't think I would have made it out of the program and be as successful as I am today.
Yeah, I would agree with Camille here, and say that I think I would prefer for my future nurses and doctors and engineers and whatever they may be have had some clinical or in-person practice rather than doing it virtually, because I'd imagine, as she said, it's not just putting something in a hole, it's much harder than that. And online might not be the same thing as when you enter this world or as a career, whatever your job is. Personally though, I think it can be useful as the world is becoming more virtual and digital, as long as students are afforded the same grace that teachers get when they're trying to figure out a PowerPoint and can't figure it out, or how to, share their screen on Zoom and they take 20 minutes to do it. Afford students the same amount of time, if they choose to do things virtual, afford students the same amount of time to learn these processes and to make mistakes and learn it again.
I agree with Camille and Marc. And I also want to say, I think, Elissa, I think your question speaks to the larger question of what are colleges going to do in response to this crisis? Are they going to keep innovating, or are they going to try to return to the norm? And I think what we should see is colleges and universities trying to keep innovating so that we can, continue to examine whether or not we can improve how we learn, how we teach, but also like a lot of questions, how do we support students? How can we really innovate in how we're supporting students in crisis and after crisis?
Yeah.
I think this shift, the virus showed that we should work towards increasing the flexibility that provides students on and off campus, especially non-traditional students like Camille, Yoslin, students have families. You know, there needs to be a flexibility where they can be there. They can know that these days they're going to be in class, in person, turning a wrench, using wire strippers, or, you know, if they're a nursing student, putting a needle into a vein, or practicing at least. But they also know that in these days they can be virtual or in person to maximize the individual student's flexibility, so they know exactly where they need to be, when they need to be, and have as many tools as possible at their disposal to make that their education happen.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like from what you're saying is like, let's use this as a learning opportunity for institutions to kind of see what's working and then what's not working. Make sure that we don't keep doing that. So we just have the last few minutes of this webinar. This has been so awesome, you guys. I wonder if each of you, we'll just go around to all of you to take a few minutes to talk about, okay, you have, 50 people listening to this webinar who are powerful people who can make change. Let's just imagine. What do you want them to know? What are kind of the policy changes that you see that are important? What are some of the things that professors and folks who run colleges should think about? So this is kind of our last, just take a few minutes, final takeaways. What do you want to see changed? What do you want to see happen at kind of a big level, high level? Does that sound okay? Okay. Who wants to go first? Nobody. Marc.
So I guess we'll start all the way at the top of this food chain. People who work in the halls of Congress, the White House, the Senate, the whatever it may be, cancel student debt. I am all here for it, and a lot of students at Big Ten are here for canceling student debt. If we're going to be entering a recession and we want to have a competitive workforce, a healthy economy, and students with opportunity, we can't have a crippling giant student debt, like foot of student debt on our necks. It's just, it doesn't make sense to me, right? Especially with how our environment is turning when it comes to learning, and how students are having to switch their roles as not just students, but as workers and as future leaders of this country. We can't have things like student debt holding us back, especially when we know that there are different methods in which student debt has piled on students in order for them to achieve a four-year degree in unequal ways. So students that come from certain backgrounds, certain geographic locations, certain identities are more susceptible to taking on more student debt in order to receive the same amount of education within higher ed, and then maybe not even receive the same or even be able to compete for a similar job just because of their identity or where they live and those kinds of things, their immigration status. If we want to recover from a COVID-19 world and not just bounce back, but be better than who we were before we entered this, I think canceling student debt is at the core of this mission. It allows students the opportunity to, as I said, students make mistakes, they learn, they grow, and they become better leaders than people before us. I think canceling student debt is at the core of that.
All right.
I'll kind of reiterate what Marc said about, I was fortunate enough not to have any student debt, but that's what held me back from going to a four-year college, is because I couldn't afford to get in any debt. Like I said, I'm a single mother, and we live on a single income, and if I wouldn't have had my parents willing to help me out and pay for her daycare while I went back to school and did internships, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So I think increasing the Pell Grant is something that needs to be considered. I know that it was able to pay for my tuition, it paid for my books, and I maybe got $500 or $600 left over during the semester. That really doesn't cover even a month's worth of bills. So it's not feasible for some people. I know one of my friends, she's a single mother to two children, and she wants to go back to school, but she just can't afford to put her kids in daycare and go to school, because Pell Grant doesn't give her enough to be able to pay for their daycare and expenses like that. So I feel like that would be something that would definitely help make more people successful, get more people better jobs, you know, make them better members of the community. So I know that it definitely would have helped me. I'm thankful that I did have a family that was there to support me and my daughter. So, but looking out for other people, I feel like that would definitely help by increasing the Pell Grant.
Great.
I kind of want to echo what Camille said, but just kind of say that they have to realize that there's no longer a traditional student. They have to realize that we are a diverse population, that universities are really no longer serving just the student that graduates from high school and moves on to college. There is a diverse population, and I think that being aware, just realizing that in the beginning, just like now, I think is really instrumental in creating legislation and creating changes within institutions. And I think my biggest one is, I think, like the food insecurity. Like I said, just realize that there is a lot of food insecurity. You know, institutions need to provide, I think, a daycare center, a child care center. That's not the same amount as my tuition. Because quite frankly, I don't have $24,000 to shell out a year. And I think it's really important that we put student voices at the core of every decision. I think it's really important that we listen and we reach out to make sure that the changes that we're trying to implement are really based on what they have to say and not what we think, or not what they think is best for us. And realize that these, as students, we're not looking for a handout. We're looking for a hand up, which is completely different. We're all in this ditch. We're not looking for the handout. We're looking for help to get out of the ditch. And I think that's a different way that we have to see things.
Kat?
Yeah, everything Yoslin just said is just so important. And I really want to reiterate, especially like on the congressional level, to listen to your students. Again, Cornell's Office of Student Government Relations is completely student run, and they're advocating for a student recovery benefit, which advocates for financial support for all students. Again, we're seeing so many issues with equity where students, especially our low income folks, are really finding this a really difficult time for them, and learning is harder than ever. On the state level, we want commitment to keep funding higher ed. State budget cuts have been hitting higher education institutions, and those like directly affect students as well. And on the university level, work with your students and your organizations. I would also encourage universities to look into their transfer credit policies. I transferred into Cornell, and I think it's really important to mention that like transfer students lose on average about 40% of their credits, and that can be so harmful for like student retention and like completion of their degrees. So just look into all of that.
Nice list, Kat. Thank you. Patrick?
So I think Camille and Marc really touched on the student debt portion, but it's also a symptom of what I think is the larger issue, which is the cost of school. Now, I understand educating 40,000 students at a school is an expensive endeavor, but school, states, and nationally, we need to put stronger, more powerful tools in the hands of students that allow them to mitigate that cost as much as possible. Like, for example, the GI Bill, like, there was no way I could ever have gotten a bachelor's degree on my own without joining the military. Like, I could never afford it, or I would have went into an insane amount of student debt. But the tool, the GI Bill as a tool, allowed me to get a bachelor's and then get a master's degree, or work on a master's degree. I haven't got it yet. And be able to do that essentially debt-free, unless I choose to take on debt to help pay for it, like for my own personal expenses. So to me, student debt is an issue, of course, absolutely. But the other issue, the other side of the coin, is the cost of school. And to find a way to mitigate that cost, to bring it down, to allow students to have a sort of weight off their shoulder as they attend school, and not have to worry about this giant boulder of student debt behind them that they're going to have to push up the mountain when they're done, and help them get that job, get that good paying job, and contribute to the national economy like that.
Yeah. Well, this has been so wonderful. I feel like we've gotten a lot of really, really good concrete takeaways. I loved the kind of critique of the synchronistic classes, like just how important that flexibility is, especially when you've got other stuff like jobs and kids. Recording the lecture and having that available, like that's a great idea. A little bit of mourning for all the hands-on stuff that we're missing out on in the groups, and also just a note for colleges to be creative and thoughtful about how they repackage that in a virtual environment. I think that's super important. I loved the idea of having more tutors and having fellow students be like peer mentors and tutors as we head into perhaps a virtual fall. So I just want to say thank you all so much for your thoughts. You guys are really the experts in higher ed. You're the people who are experiencing it, and so we should listen to you way more often. So today's webinar was hosted by Today's Students Coalition, and you can find more information at their website, todaysstudentscoalition.org. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you to our panelists for offering your thoughts.